Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's learning session, Estimating Forest Biomass Using LiDAR Clouds, organized by WWF Forest and Climate. Thank you so much for taking the time to join us today. My name is Emmeline Gasparini, and I'm a Program Associate with the Forest and Climate team. And our presenter today is Mauro Assis. Next slide, please. So before we begin, I'd like to go over a few logistics and some frequently asked questions. For those of you who have participated in past sessions, this will sound familiar, but yes, today's presentation is being recorded, and you can find the recording within a few days on our YouTube channel. To get to the recording, simply go to youtube.com and search for WWF Forest and Climate. There are two audio options. You can listen through your computer or dial in through the phone number that was provided in your registration email. It's important to note that if you experience audio difficulties while listening through your computer, those are sometimes caused by having too many browser windows or programs open at once. So feel free to close some of them, which usually solves the issue, or you're always welcome to join by phone. And if you continue to have technical difficulties, please send me a message via the questions function, and I'll try to get you sorted out. And along those lines, questions are absolutely welcome. You can send your questions anytime during the webinar using the toolbar on your screen, and we'll answer as many as possible during our allotted time. After the webinar, you'll receive a link in your follow-up email with additional forest and climate resources, both from WWF and from Mauro, including a link to the YouTube channel where you can watch a recording of the session. So thank you again for joining us, and with that, we'll get started. Mauro, take us away. Next slide.
Okay, here we go. Next slide, yes. Our agenda for today, well, good morning, good evening, good afternoon, anyway. Our agenda for today is a small topic review, talking about basically about biomass and LiDAR. I'll talk a bit about the project where I'm involved, where I'm estimating biomass using LiDAR clouds. Then I will talk about some important topics about LiDAR cloud, quality control, quality assurance. And then, last but not least, we are using how to use LiDAR clouds to estimate biomass. Next slide, please. Well, biomass is the total mass of organisms distributed in a given area of volume, okay? We have, in terms of when we talk about forest biomass, we are most of the times interested in vegetation biomass, because this is the huge amount of biomass of forest environment. Inside vegetation biomass, we have two kinds of biomass. We have above ground biomass, that is trees and other kind of vegetation that grows on the soil. And we have the below ground biomass that are the roots, basically. Of course, if we are talking about remote sensing, we are talking about above ground biomass, okay? But there's a nice relationship between above ground biomass and below ground biomass. So estimating the above ground biomass, if it's necessary to estimate the below ground biomass, we can use some models that correlate both types of biomass, and we have the total biomass of the environment, of the forest. Next slide, please. LiDAR. Okay, LiDAR is a remote sensing method that uses laser, a pulse of laser, that is emitted and basically measure the distance between a target and the emitter. Okay, so LiDAR is, when we talk about LiDAR, we are talking about distance measurement. This LiDAR process, they create a three-dimensional information, a solid information about the targets. This is very nice because LiDAR is the only sensor that gives us, or the best sensor to give us the information about the vertical distribution of biomass, of objects, okay? If you have a satellite photograph, for example, we don't have the measurement of the soil and the distance of the canopy and the soil. LiDAR on the other hand, give us this solid, the 3D structure of the forest that's important to estimate many things like biomass. The LiDAR clouds that we are using are ALS LiDAR. There is a LiDAR cloud collected using a sensor installed on an airplane that flies about the forest. There are different kinds of LiDAR that can be used as well to deal with forestry stuff. Next slide, please. Well, in this picture, we can see how things happen when we have a LiDAR pulse projected to a forest tree, okay? To forest trees. The pulse is reflected by different parts of the forest, by the leaves, by the branches, and even the trunk, and of course the soil, and it turns back to the flight and is registered at the airplane equipment. We have basically two kinds of information in LiDAR clouds, in LiDAR flights. We have a waveform, that is, we can see this, you can see this in the right part of the picture. We can have a wave, there is a lot of values describing a wave that is returned by laser pulse, and we have the peaks of these waves, and we have different names for these types of data. The wave data, we call it full waveform data, okay? And we have the peaks, what we call as discrete LiDAR. We are using in our project, and this presentation is about discrete LiDAR, okay? That is, we are using only discrete LiDAR data to estimate the biomass in this presentation and in the project that I work for. Next slide, please. The project that I work for is INPE, estimation of biomass of Amazon. The idea, the final project of this project is to create a biomass map of the Brazilian Amazon, because it's necessary for the climate compromise that Brazil signed. We have to provide the balance of carbon, and we have to produce this information to the people interested in this subject. There are, of course, other maps produced before that one that we are producing now. But we found that the difference between other estimates are very high. So the idea of the INPE project, what makes the difference for our projects is that we are using LiDAR to help us to estimate the biomass. That is, the other maps that were did before, that were done before this one, not use LiDAR in any step, and as we are using now. Next slide, please. Well, in a schema about our project, we have some ground data, some field data. That is, we went to the field and get some measurement about biomass in plots on the field. We did some measurement, but we had a lot of partners that has field data and provide us this field data. We exchanged data with them. That is, we flew above their plots, areas on the field, and we provide them the LiDAR data, and they provide us back their field data, their biomass estimation of the field data. So we had a lot of different plots spread around the Amazon in a way to improve our studies, okay? Then we made a lot of LiDAR flights. We collected the clouds that we are using to estimate the biomass. That is, we have two kinds of flights. We have the flights that were specified above the plots, above the research area of the partners, and we have a lot of LiDAR flights that were randomly spread around the whole Amazon. That is, the idea is to construct a model that can estimate biomass only based on LiDAR data and validate this with field data. And then using this LiDAR data we collected, we extrapolate it using remote sense to create an Amazon area, a map for whole Amazon area. Next slide, please. In the INPE project, we had about 1,000 flights, okay, spread over the Amazon. Despite it's a huge number of flights, we are covering only about 0.004% of Amazon area. That is, despite we are doing a lot of flights, we are covering a very small area from Amazon. And we will need to extrapolate using the satellite data, okay? We specified for our flights, we have to have at least 4 returns per square meters. This is a very low points density, and we choose that because we made some tests, and we can see that with 4 points per square meter, 4 returns per square meter, we will have a digital terrain model that's okay for our demands. That is, and for us, it's important to use a slow point density because as the area is very huge, we put the focus on to have as much flight as we can, okay? And so we are using a small points density in a way to get more flights because as we need, as we ask for higher densities, the flights get more expensive, okay? Next slide, please. When we decided to use LiDAR data to research something, it's necessary to define some important points before we started to hire those flights, okay? And the first important thing that we have to decide is the global points density. That is, for each cloud that we are receiving, we are paying for, how much is what's the number of points we need at minimum to points density to have an acceptable LiDAR cloud. And so this is the most important parameter that we have to define. In our case, I told you, it's 4 points per square meter. After that, we have to ask the guys that will fly, what's the minimum percent is acceptable for a cover area, okay? That is, because when they start to fly, it's sometimes there's a windy condition, and so it's difficult to keep the airplane straight on the flight line. And sometimes they don't cover the whole area that was specified. So we should define how much of the area should be covered that I will consider as acceptable. We started to asking them 20%, but 20% is very high. I think the maximum value is 5%, and today we are specifying that we need 2%, the 2%, that is, they have to cover 98% of the area as we consider the cloud acceptable in terms of quality, okay? Another important point about, I will show this in pictures after that, and maybe I will make this more clear. One important parameter is the number of cells, that is, you decide, for example, a cell is a 20 meters large square in the cloud. You calculate the points density for each cell, and you specify how much of the cells can keep density less than 4 meters than your minimum density points, okay? Because sometimes you have problems, quality problems inside the cloud. it flies too fast in a part of the cloud and slowly on the other part, and so we have a density variation during the flight. And so it's important to define a parameter that specifies the quality along the flight. Of course, you have to specify the last format version. Last is a specification that defines what kind of information are stored inside the LiDAR cloud. So there are different versions of this kind of files, and so you should define a format version that fits your needs. That is, when you look inside, all the information you need is inside the cloud, okay? We have also to check the internal cloud integrity. That is, for example, if a cloud is specified as having 50 million points, you see in the header that is 50 million points, but you have to go inside the cloud and count these points in a way if these points are okay. There is the number of points specified are really present inside the cloud, okay? And you have, for example, to check the min and maximum values of the cloud in a way to not have points with that are not making sense. You have to do this job to check this quality as soon as you receive data, and sometimes it's necessary to specify, to ask the guys to fly again to the same area in a way to provide a LiDAR cloud with better quality. We create a lot of Python routines to check the quality of automatically verify these parameters. And in the email you receive, there's a link to our GitHub repository, and our source code of this verification is in this GitHub repository. You can use it and modify as you wish, okay? Next slide, please. Those are some examples about problems with LiDAR clouds. In the first two pictures, in the top pictures, you can see maybe a cloud that the plane passed over, and we have a lot of points that are very high, about 250 meters above the trees. Of course, if you put this cloud to estimate biomass, it will cause an overestimation of biomass. So you have to find a way to cut this part of the cloud, or if the problem is impact the whole quality that you specify for the flight, you have to ask the guys to fly again because the cloud is not acceptable. Okay, but for example, when as we are working with Amazon, there's a lot of rain there, so these problems happen sometimes, and we have to accept the cloud and not reject it, because if it's almost impossible to get all the transects clear of clouds. Okay, the picture below, we can see a flight where the speed of flight changed a lot along the flight. In this picture, the red points are the points that has a points density below 4 square meters per 4 points per square meter. The green ones is below between 4 and 8 points per square meter, and the blue ones is above 8 points per square meter. As you can see, those strips indicates that the flight speed changed a lot along the flight. I talked to the pilot, and they told me that this happens when they have a very windy condition, pushing or pulling back the airplane, and we have this kind of problem. And in this case, the case of this cloud, we reject it because more than 20% of the points have less than 4 returns per square meter. This is a not acceptable cloud. Next slide, please. This is another cloud. It's okay. The points density, as you can see, it's green almost the flight. But by the end, there's I think the sensor remain switched on when the plane maneuvers. So during the plane maneuver, so we have this circle by the end of the cloud. In this case, if you use this cloud as it is, as they deliver you, the problem is that inside the circle, the algorithm you will consider as points without biomass, okay? And so it will impact on the biomass estimate of the transect. But as you can see in the picture, the other picture, the dark green is the area we plan to fly, and the lighter green is the area that were flown. As we can see, it covers the area we need. So the only thing that we have to do is to cut the cloud in a way to put away the circle and use the cloud. It's not necessary to ask them to fly again about this because of this problem. Okay. Next slide, please. This is the fluxogram that describes the whole process of biomass estimation after we check the quality of the cloud. I will not describe this in this slide. This is only for you to have an idea, a big picture of the process. I will describe this process in the next slides, okay? Next slide, please. Well, the first step after we accept a LiDAR cloud and decide to use this cloud to estimate biomass is to filter the noise there is. There are some points that are collected by the sensor that are not really points. For example, sometimes we have birds flying over the forest. Sometimes we have some spikes, we don't know why, but sometimes there are points that are floating over the forest. So it's necessary to run something to remove these points, okay? I will open a parenthesis here to discuss which kind of software we will use to process LiDAR clouds. We have to estimate biomass using LiDAR, we have basically two softwares to use when we decide to estimate biomass. We have Fusion. That's a software that is provided for US Forest Service. It's a free software. You just download and use it. And we have LaSTools. That's a commercial software that's produced by a German company called Rapid. And there's a free version of this software as well, but it runs only for small clouds. It can't process huge clouds, and so it's almost impossible to use LaSTools to estimate biomass without paying for the license. In our project, we started using Fusion, but we have some trouble with support because it's a free software, and so sometimes it's difficult to correct some bugs, etc. So we decided to license LaSTools and use LaSTools, but only because of the support. Okay, you can decide how to use. We can decide which one you would like to use. I will show you my scripts using LaSTools, but in the email that we will receive, there's a link with a very nice tutorial about about scripts on scripts to estimate biomass using Fusion. So if you check there and if you decide to use Fusion, you can use this link, and then you will find the corresponding instructions to do what I will show you in the next slides. So to remove the noise, we use Las Noise. That's a tool provided by LasTools, one of the applications that's part of LasTools package. And it will remove these points like you are seeing on the picture in this slide, okay? In a way to keep us, to improve the quality of our biomass estimative. Next slide, please. After we remove the noise, it's necessary to classify the points in the cloud. The idea is you have to classify the soil points, to find the soil points, that points that are where the laser travel through the trees and hit the soil, hit the ground, and travel back to the sensor, and classify it. And what's above these points are points of biomass. So the first algorithm to use is last ground, that will classify the soil points. I put this example. It's a very, very healing transect. It's not common in Amazon. Most of the time you have flat ones, but this is one that's a bit healing. And the pink points are classified as soil, and the green ones are classified as not soil, not vegetation yet. Okay, and the software that I use to see the LiDAR clouds is a free software as well, called FugroViewer. The link is not on the email. I forgot it, but if you wish, you can write to me, and I will provide you the link to download FugroViewer. But LasTools has a LiDAR viewer, and Fusion has a LiDAR viewer as well. So you can use another software. I'm using FugroViewer because I like it. The next slide, please. The next step is to get we flat the forest. That is, we get the Z coordinate of the soil points. We make this equal 0, and we subtract for the not soil points the value of the soil of the points near that point. That is, for example, we divide the LiDAR clouds in cells with 20 meters large. The points that are soil there, we made the Z coordinate equal 0. And from the points that are above 0, we subtract for these points the average of the coordinates of the points that we turn in 0. It's like I got that healing transect and force it on a table, okay? In a way, I have the vegetation coordinates, all the vegetation coordinates based in 0, not based in altitude, in geographic altitude, okay? Next slide, please. Then we use an algorithm that will classify the vegetation points at vegetation. It classifies as well buildings and other structures that it can find on on our clouds. Okay. Here I can, in the picture, you can see I clicked on a point using FugroViewer. You can see a vegetation point. The Z coordinate is 6.62. That is above 0, above the arbitrary 0. And you can see the class is 5, high vegetation. That is, we have the vegetation classified in this cloud. Okay, if you click on different points, you can see the height of this, the height of the points that we just classified. Next slide, please. Well, this is the script, LasTools script, that we use to produce those results that we just saw. The first command is slice noise. That is, we are processing this LiDAR cloud and remove the LiDAR, the noise. That is, it's not. I will not classify, because it was possible to classify a point as noise, but I don't have. It's not interesting for us to keep noise points inside the cloud. So I just strip it out and keep only the points that are not noise. Okay. Then the command of last ground, the command that classify the soil points, is not able to process huge clouds. It's a very complicated algorithm, and so we have to divide the cloud in tiles. Okay, classify the ground points and normalize the height, and then we join the cloud again after we end the process. The command that divide the cloud is that one, last tile. Is called last tile, and last tile in our case, the tile size is 1,000 meters. That is, each tile will be a square with 1,000 meters side. We are creating a buffer. A buffer, it's a 100-meter. It's a buffer. It's an area that's because in a way to avoid the border effect. Okay, we will work with 1,000 points tile, but we are putting on the cloud 100 meters away from the more than the 1,000 ones, in a way to have a buffer and do not have a border effect in terms of our algorithms to classify the cloud. When we create again the cloud, we remove the buffer, of course. I'm specifying that the buffer is reversible. That is, it will be necessary to join the cloud again after we process it. I have to put this reversible option if I intend to reverse this later. After that, we use last ground to classify the points as ground. Okay, each piece of each tile that we create before. After that, we use last high to normalize the clouds. That is, to subtract the height of the points. I'm putting the replace Z option in a way to put the whole cloud as if it was flat. Next slide, please. The next instructions are, the idea is to classify vegetation points as vegetation, and the last instruction is to reverse the tiling. Okay, to recreate the cloud, but the cloud now is ready for we use it to process and estimate biomass. We have now a cloud that I can use to find biomass of the cloud of the forest based on the LiDAR data. Next slide, please. Well, here's an example of a LiDAR cloud where I have plots. Okay, the plots are the small squares, brown squares, and we flew over the whole transect, and we have the plots inside. We cover all the plots of this research. The next step that's necessary, I have to clip the cloud, create a cloud that corresponds to the field parcel. That is, I have to clip the cloud using the parcel limits. To do that, I use the command last clip, and I pass the name of the cloud, and I pass a shapefile containing the drawing of the plots. Okay, and as I have a shapefile containing different plots, it's necessary I specify the minus split parameter, and the plot is the name of the field inside the shapefile that has the name of the parcel, okay? And so last clip we will create different last files corresponding to the names of the plots inside the shapefile plots. That's it. Next slide, please. Here we can have an image of the LiDAR cloud clipped on a parcel, one of those parcels that I showed before. As you can see the trees inside the canopy, inside that small cloud. We will use this small cloud to create some kind of model in a way to correlate field biomass data to cloud parameters, okay? That is, the idea is to have a biomass equation that's based only in LiDAR data. In a way, I can estimate biomass in every point of I have LiDAR clouds. Next slide, please. Well, next step is generate what we call the LiDAR metrics. In this case, I will generate the LiDAR metrics corresponding to the plots. To do that, we use a command, in LastTools command called lastCanopy, okay? It will process a LiDAR cloud corresponding to a parcel number 2, okay? I have to put a parameter specifying that this is a plot. I will explain that after, because it's necessary to specify this parameter when we are dealing with plots. And then I specify which kind of metrics I think it's important to study. What are those metrics? Metrics are statistics about LiDAR points, okay? For example, the minus min specified that lastCanopy should calculate and inform us the minimum point of this plot. The minus max, the maximum point of this plot. The minus average, standard deviation, skewness, kurtosis, and etc., covariance, etc. And we have some important that are those minus p specified here. These minus p parameters specifies the percentiles that are a measurement very important to understand the vertical structure of the forest. When I talk, for example, minus p 5 is meters, okay? When I specify minus p 5, I'm specifying that it will calculate how much points it's necessary in this plot to know what's the height in meters that contains 5% of the points, okay? And percentile 10 is the same, that is the height that contains until 10% of the points. And as you can infer, I think, as much I have, for example, if I have a great height for 9%, it means that my force is very high. That is, those percentages give us a measurement of the vertical structure of the forest. Most of the models that estimate biomass of forestry are based on percentages. Okay. Next slide, please. Well, now you adjust your models. That is, you find a way to define a model, a mathematical equation, or a non-parametric model that correlates those metrics that you calculate for the parcel with the biomass value of your parcels, okay? I will not, it's away from the scope of this presentation, to discuss how to choose models, etc. But you have basically two kinds of models. That is, you have parametric ones. The parametric ones models, the parametric models are those that provide us an equation, that is. And you can have, for example, a linear one, non-linear ones. For example, if you have a pinus forestry in a flat area, maybe a linear modeling correlating only one metric with biomass is okay for you. But if you have a native forest like Amazon, you have to find more complicated models that will just use a lot of different parameters to estimate corrected biomass. And you can have the option to use non-parametric models like friend of forest in a way to estimate biomass, okay? So in this phase, you will create you adjust your models, that is, choose which parameters you will use, which coefficients you will create, you will need to create an equation or a non-parametric model to estimate biomass. Next slide, please. As an example, we are using in our project, in INPE project, we are using a Longo equation. You have in the slide the paper that they published with this equation. We use our plots to calibrate this equation. That is, we use this equation to estimate the biomass of the parcels that we have, of the plots that we have, and we saw that it's okay for us. That is, the quality of estimation of Longo's equation, it's okay for estimate biomass in Amazon, in different kind of forests that we have in Amazon, okay? And this equation is about carbon, above ground carbon estimation. But there's a relationship between carbon and biomass. That is, about half of biomass is considered carbon. And so we can use this equation and just multiply by 2, and we will have above ground biomass estimation. This equation, we have the following parameters. If you look at the equation, we have the H, the parameter H. Here's the median height of the points in the plot. We use the kurtosis parameter, and the H5 and H10 are the percentiles. Percentile 5, that is the number of points, the height of the points that will contain 5% of the points. The H10 is the height of the height that will contain 10% of the points. The HIQ is the height that contains 75% of the point minus height that contains 25% of the point. And the H100 is the maximum height inside the plot, okay? The second parameter that we are not using is the idea is to estimate the uncertainty of the biomass estimation, okay? And so in the INPE project, we use the field data, the plot data, to estimate, to validate this equation, and then we use this equation to estimate biomass of our transects. And how can we do that? Next slide. Then we use the same last canopy that we use to estimate the parameters, the LiDAR matrix that we are using to use in our model. We use to estimate the parameters for the whole transect. It divides the transect in in small squares. I specify here minus the step 20.0. That is, each cell of the transect will have 20 meters side, okay, and then it will calculate the metrics for each piece of LiDAR cloud with cell in a way to allow us to estimate the biomass, and it will calculate the same statistical parameters that we use in the parcel and generate a CSV file. When we open the CSV file, I can see the X and Y columns. The X and Y columns are the centroid of the cell, okay? And then we have the statistics for each, the number for each statistic that we calculate. So now we just use these parameters. We put these parameters on the equation that we choose, on the model that we create, or the model that I'm using, in our case, long model, and then we estimate the biomass of the transect. To estimate the biomass of the whole transect is just sum the biomass of each cell, okay? And we have the total biomass. If I divide the total biomass by the area of the transect, I have the biomass per area unit, per square meter, for example, okay? Next slide, please. And that's it. That's the final of the presentation. And those links that are in the presentation you will receive in the email. You can contact me by email as well if you have some doubts, if you are interested in discussing something else about the presentation or whatever. And thank you very much for your attention. And that's it.
Thank you, Mauro. That was very thorough and comprehensive. We do have some questions already from participants, but for those of you who are listening, this is your time now to send questions in. We've got a little less than 15 minutes to answer them, so I'll get right on it. So the first question I want to ask is, why don't you use full waveform LiDAR data to estimate biomass?
In fact, we are not using, we are using discrete data to estimate biomass. We are not, because when we decided to use LiDAR to estimate biomass, the only sensor that we know was discrete ones. But when we started to collect data, we started to receive full waveform data. So we thought, why not use full waveform data to estimate biomass? But as we looked in the literature, there are quite a few papers published about how to use full waveform to estimate biomass. So we collected the full waveform data. We have it. We can share this with you if something is interested. But in fact, we are using only discrete because it was our plan since the beginning. Okay.
All right, that makes sense. I have two people asking whether you can use drones instead of planes to use LiDAR data, or do you need an airplane to, say, attain a certain height to be able to scan?
Yes, today we have sensors that are possible to put in drones. Okay, and so there are people, even in the Amazon, people are using drones to collect data from Amazon. In our case, it was impossible because the size of the area. There's an area that we don't have data because even the plane could go there. And so the problem with drone, it's about autonomy. But today it's possible to use drones to collect ALS data. It's perfect possible to use drones, and people are using drones. And of course, it's far cheaper than use planes.
That is one question. Someone did ask whether there's sort of a general cost associated with a LiDAR flight, or is that something that's really very variable based on
Yes, of
location?
course, it's very, very, very variable. It depends on the amount of data you are interested in collecting. Depends on the region. For example, in Amazon, have different areas that are we don't have airports there, and so I don't. It's difficult to do that. It depends on a lot of stuff. Okay.
Oh, yeah, of course.
I think in our project it was about 6,000 reais, Brazilian reais. That is about maybe $2,000 each flight. But it's a package of 1,000. There is, and the same day sometimes the guy can collect 3 or 4 transacts. Of course, if you are hiring you need only one transact, it will be far more expensive than that price that we are having here in Brazil for IBA project. Okay.
All right. So you showed us the slide with the hill, and one of our participants is asking whether this method is feasible in areas with high relief. So they mentioned, the Himalayas, the topography can be very dramatically varying. Is there sort of a barrier, or after which this method is less helpful?
Yes, I think for healing places, I think the problem is far more complicated. Last tools and Fusion, they have parameters that you can specify in a way to get more precise estimatives in healing places. And I think, of course, if you have if you improve the returns density, for example, instead of use 4 points per square meter, you use 20. Of course, your estimatives, your reading of the soil, the terrain will be improved. One first thing that you can do is to make a test flight. You go there, get data, and for example, get a very, very dense flight, about 30 points per square meter. And then you use an algorithm to reduce randomly this cloud and test your algorithm and see the impact of reducing the amount of points, the points density, in your results in a way to find the minimum point density that is adequate to your demand. Okay, and we did this in our project.
Thank you. Several people are asking sort of how applicable this model is beyond the Amazon. So is this something that could be useful in the Congo Basin or on a forest, bamboo forest, for example? What kind of tweaks would need to happen, or what changes would need to happen to make it useful in those places?
I'm not the owner of the model, and I'm not a biometrist. That is, I'm not a specialist in modeling. Okay, but I think you should test. There is this model for the whole Amazon. It fits very nice, and of course, in tropical forest, maybe it makes sense, but you should test. Okay, it's not maybe. I think if you contact Marcos Longo, and the people that collaborated with the elaboration of the model, you will have a better idea about what happened. If it's possible, what they think. I think you should ask they directly. Maybe they will give you a better idea. Okay.
All right. It's always nice to be able to refer people to additional resources. One of our participants is asking, since this is an estimation, how accurate is this process in terms of the outputs produced?
Yeah, we are now we are working on it. That is, we have we made some measurement of statistics correlation, it was high. It's about, I don't have the numbers in my memory, but we checked the model is okay, and we will produce an uncertainty map. We will produce two maps: a map of biomass and a map of uncertainty, in a way to describe the uncertainty of the estimative that we are publishing. But I don't have the number in my memory. I don't know. But you can, if you are interested in this, you can write to me, and I can provide you some numbers about how accurate is this equation in specific places in Amazon. I can do that.
And will part of those, or that estimation, include a comparison with existing data? That's one thing that one of our participants is asking, is whether you've compared it or will compare it with existing data in the area.
We are comparing and validating it with field data that we have, the plots that people, our partners provide us about 300, 400 field plots data, okay? And we compare the Longo estimatives with those field data, and we find it's okay. So we validate it, the Longo equation for our biomass estimative using the field plots, the field plot data that our partners provide us.
Great. Are any of these techniques applicable for radar data instead of LiDAR data? Can we transfer some of these tools?
No, absolutely no.
All right.
No.
And would that answer be the same for satellite imagery data as well?
Yes. It's LiDAR. It's far more simple. It's simpler than radar and imaging, and nothing that I talk here it's applicable to other kind of sensor. It's only about LiDAR.
Okay, good to clarify. Can you tell us a little bit about the criteria that you use to select the areas for sampling?
Well, we flew above our partner's area because I have to have data to correlate with the field data, okay? And then we use an algorithm that is randomly spread the flights for the area that we are covering, that is for Brazil and Amazon. And I don't know, I don't remember the algorithm, but I think it's not important. We have to find a random way to, but which random way, I don't know, it's not that important. You select it and spread in a way you have a nice density of flight, that is, you have to assure that you are covering the whole data, but I think it's not that important.
All right.
Choose someone.
Yeah. Can you tell us a little bit more about the data that was collected by the ground team that you then compared with your LiDAR data?
How they collected?
Kind of data was it that you were comparing? So what were they collecting on the ground that you then compared?
They use the traditional way to estimate the biomass on the field. That is, most of of course, there are different views and different guys use different ways to estimate biomass on the field. But basically, they measure for example, they select the plot, go to the plot, and then they measure the DBH, that is the diameter, a meter, the diameter of the tree, a meter and 37 centimeters above the ground, because there's a good relationship between this measurement and the biomass. And some guys, they used to measure the height of the trees. Sometimes they don't even measure the height of the trees because it's difficult to measure the height of the tree. And sometimes the guys measure the density of the tree, because there's a lot of variation, depends on the species. Of course, they classify the species of the trees, and using this data, they create their models to estimate the biomass of the parcel. But for us, the only thing that is important is the plot biomass. There is it's not important the tree biomass, because we are not working at tree level, okay? And but they use the traditional methods to estimate plot biomass. That's this. They collect some variables there, what they consider important, and there's different schools in forest research. Some people are important something, some other people think something else is important. But the final, by the end of the day, our interest is the biomass estimation that they have for each parcel that they provide us.
Great. Thank you. That was very helpful. So we've actually come to the end of our time today. We do have a few very specific questions that I might follow up with you afterwards, but participants, if you had a very specific question that you wanted to run past Mauro, his information is included in the PDF of the presentation that will be included in the video description when I post this recording. So you will be able to contact him directly to get assistance, or some of you are asking about other resources available. So we'll send you that email about an hour after we formally finish here. But I can tell that there's a lot of desire for for specific one-on-one information. So Mauro and I can follow up after with any of those. But since we've come to the end of our time today, let's move to the next slide, please. And I really want to thank you, Mauro, for sharing your expertise with our community. As you can see, this is a topic that people are really interested in. And thank you, participants, for sending in your questions. It's always fun to feel to be on the hot seat. And as I said, you'll all receive a follow-up email in a few hours with additional resources that are specific to this webinar, including links to the resources on the previous slide from this presentation. Next slide, please. And if you want to revisit this webinar or share it with colleagues, the recording will be up on the Forest and Climate YouTube channel, hopefully by the end of today, if not by tomorrow. And while you're waiting for this webinar to be posted, you can also revisit recordings of previous sessions for additional enrichment on a variety of subjects that are relevant for forest and climate and REDD+ work. Next slide, please. So thank you all again for joining us, and thank you again, Mauro, for your really excellent presentation, and I hope you all have a wonderful day.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.